When most of us hear the term first fruits, we probably picture some kind of ancient harvest festival, right? Baskets of grain, that sort of thing. But what if that's just scratching the surface? What if the real meaning is way more personal, way more intense? In this explainer, we're diving into first fruits not as just some event, but as a season of deep, honest, spiritual examination. Right off the bat, Jeremiah 2:3 gives us a huge clue. It says, Israel was holiness unto the Lord, and the first fruits of his increase. Get that? This tells us that first fruits isn't just something you bring, it's something you become. The people themselves, they were the offering.
So we've got to look past the simple agricultural stuff to really get what's going on here. This is a spiritual summons, a call that goes way beyond the fields and right into the very heart of a follower. And this is where it all clicks. On the one hand, you have the surface meaning. Yeah, it's an agricultural offering. Simple enough. But the perceptual meaning? Whoa, that's a total game changer. It becomes a covenantal summons, a deep call to offer the very first and absolute best of your inner self. We're talking your heart, your mind, your whole life. Let's dig into that a little more. The words tied to first fruits, heir, preeminence, foremost, they all point to being number one, to having the most important position. So the call isn't just to give something, but to be a living offering, to prove through your first works that JEHOVAH actually has first place in your life. Okay, so if we're supposed to make this internal offering, where does that even happen? Well, the source material gives us this really powerful metaphor for the process, the altar. But trust me, this is probably not the kind of altar you're picturing. The word altar here is actually defined as a place of slaughter. Yeah, it's a pretty intense idea. And it's not about animal sacrifices. It's about being a place to slay the things inside us that corrupt our offering, our pride, all our pretending, and especially our self-deception. It's a call for some brutal honesty with ourselves.
This really sets the standard for what happens at the altar. Just like David writes in Psalm 51:6, JEHOVAH desires truth in the inward parts. The focus is zeroed in, not on our outward performance, but on the raw, unfiltered truth of what's really going on inside.
So this altar has two big jobs, really. First up is confrontation. You have to be willing to face the shadows, the hidden things that are holding you back. And second is purification, to go through the refiner's fire. And that fire isn't meant to destroy you, it's designed to separate what's pure from what's not. But what happens if we just say no? What if we refuse this whole difficult process of examination? Well, the source material gives a really stark warning through a parable, what it calls a dark speech, about these broken cisterns. So the story starts with this master craftsman, a guy who's the best at what he does. But his skill created this dangerous pride, a kind of poison that, as Proverbs 16:18 warns us, always, always comes before a fall. And here's the moment it all goes wrong. His best piece of work, his masterpiece, gets a crack. Now, instead of confessing it and fixing it the right way, his pride makes him hide it. He just patches it over with clay, hoping nobody will ever notice. He chose how it looked over what it was. Appearance over integrity. But here's the thing you can't get around. What we hide from each other is totally out in the open before JEHOVAH. That secret flaw, it didn't just stay put, it spread. And that one little bit of internal corruption, that one crack, it led to all of his other works failing, one after another. A total catastrophe. The lesson here is so powerful. An unexamined soul is exactly like that broken cistern. It might look perfectly fine from the outside, but on the inside, it's leaking life, it's leaking purpose, it's leaking truth. That hidden pride, that refusal to go to the altar, it will eventually corrode every single thing you try to build. Any work that's built on a foundation of deception is just doomed to collapse. So nobody wants to be a broken cistern, right? How do we actively approach this altar? Well, the process involves some really practical steps, and it also means understanding the role that trials and hardships play in refining us. This whole examination process really boils down to 4 very practical things. First, you've got to slay pride. The altar is no place for self-glorification. Second, you have to examine your devotions. Ask yourself, does JEHOVAH get the first and best of me, or just the leftovers? Third, check how you handle correction. Do you take it with humility, or do you get defensive and rebel? And fourth, as we see in Luke 16:10, look at your faithfulness in the small, everyday things. That's where your true character really shows itself. And this whole idea of being refined,
It's also explained through another story, the parable of the hedged vineyard. And what this does is totally reframe how we should look at hardship. It teaches that trials aren't punishment, they are actually instruments that Jehovah uses to refine us. So let's break down this symbolism because it's really incredible. The hedge around the vineyard, that represents our mortality, our afflictions. But it's not a prison, it's actually a protective barrier for the promise that's growing inside us. The winepress symbolizes trials that crush us. But just like grapes, that crushing is what produces something precious, righteousness. And the children in the story, they represent our souls, our very character, that are born and refined through this process, multiplying the value of what we were given in the first place. So after all that crushing, what's the payoff? Well, Isaiah 61:7 promises that instead of shame, you will have double honor. Enduring this refining process with the right heart doesn't lead to ruin, no way. It leads to a much greater reward and a joy that lasts. All right, so we've looked at the why and the how of this honest examination. Now let's pull it all together and get crystal clear on what the true, acceptable FirstFruits offering really is. This brings us to the bottom line, the crucial distinction. The unacceptable offering? That's the flawless outward performance. It's the vessel patched up with pride, just like the broken cistern. But the acceptable offering? That's a truthful heart laid bare. It's a heart that is completely surrendered to the work of being examined and refined. It all comes back to that foundational truth we find in 1 Samuel 16:7. Jehovah doesn't look at the outward appearance. He looks at the heart. In the end, what's going on inside us is literally the only thing that matters. And that leads us to the single biggest takeaway from this entire explainer. The true first fruit isn't the fruit of the field. It's the fruit of examination, the fruit that grows from a heart willing to be confronted, purified, and made whole. So I want to leave you with this question to really carry with you. This season of FirstFruits, it demands an offering from every single one of us. So after all this, the real question isn't about what you have to give. It's about this. What is the true, unvarnished state of the vessel, of your heart, that you are going to bring to the altar?